Thanks for having me. So I will indeed talk about one model that is called Neue Auftraggeber in German, New Patrons in English, Nouveau Commanditaire in French, and in whatever other language where this model is being practiced. And I will start by reminding us that there is one element of culture in cultural production that we don't talk about so often in our contemporary art discourse world, which is commissioning artworks. It's a kind of old-fashioned thing, but it's important because it's actually one of the really strong and powerful tools of how cultural goods and artworks and buildings, etc., come into the world. And since centuries, commissioning pieces by different actors in society, as you can briefly see here, and these actors, of course, changed and developed, has been a very strong expression of interest of those who commission and has shaped societies and cultures heavily. I only have to talk about, just have to think about the church and all the commissions that the church has done over centuries and how that has shaped the public imaginary and collective identities. So in democratic societies, we have different conditions of commissioning. Typically, think about expert juries or city council. But one thing, all the time, I think, didn't really change. It's more or less 1% of the population who commission contemporary cultural goods, because it has a lot of preconditions to be able to commission an important work from artists of our time. And in 1990, François Herz came up with another proposal that would theoretically and later in practice make it possible that anybody from society could have that privilege and practice it and take the responsibility to commission a work of art for the general good, for the public good. This is what is written down in the protocol by François Herz that basically suggests a very simple model, a very simple methodology based on a different relationship between two players, or three players, three stakeholders. And this is citizens, whoever they are and wherever they come from, artists, so the cultural producers, and mediators, which was a new role model that he introduced to the art world at the time. So mediators are kind of curators, so they understand the contemporary art world, they know how to produce ambitious pieces, including the political and financial processes, and who can also choose the right artist for a specific situation, but they don't act out of an own agency, like many curators do. They try to understand what the situation and the people who commission really need at best in order to find the good response for the project that they want to create, which is a much more humble role than many curators have. It's actually a long-term engagement because these projects take time, but it also needs more courage sometimes in specific public situations. So the protocol just describes the roles that each of these three actors have, their expertise, and that whatever needs to be negotiated in this relationship will be negotiated between these three people. So there is no external authority. And each of these three has their own sovereignty and autonomy. So whoever feels that he's not fine with what goes on has the freedom to speak out or step out of the project. It needs examples to make it clear. One of them is a situation, very typical situation, in a hospital specialized on cancer diseases in Marseille in southern France. And there are three nurses who are aware of a situation that they disagree with, which is the fact that many families and friends stay in the hospital for long periods of time when someone is dying. And they're literally sitting in the hallways on the benches in like difficult mental moments. And they said, we would need a space of silence or a spiritual place, but the only place we have is an old Catholic chapel But Marseille happens to be the most multi-confessional community in France. And the director of the hospital is not interested in such a project, also he doesn't have money. So they call the mediator in South France, Sylvia Mar, and say, we would need a space for that. And we think an artist would be the person to create that space, but that's about all we know, because we don't know about contemporary art. Sylvia Mar suggests Michelangelo Pistoletto to respond to the commission. The three nurses agree, they like the proposal. And he suggests to bring together the representatives of the four major religions, so Christian, Jewish, Islam, and Buddhist, if I'm not mistaken, have I forgotten one? And a university professor of philosophy for the atheists and agonists. And they sit together for the first time as religious representatives to negotiate what type of spiritual object that would bring so that each community is equally represented. And Pistoletto designed that space, as you can see, so that everybody has their share in the space with transparent walls in between. And it's used every day. Since then, budget 240,000 euros, public money, and is legally owned by the hospital. So it's a very unlikely situation. This is why I'm in favor of this model, that three nurses would have the possibility to act that way and to collaborate with Pistoletto, and also to negotiate with him the mental, emotional, psychological space of that hospital that they understand and he doesn't. So that's where it's really crucially important that everybody brings in their competence. Other situation in France is a school in a small village that has 400 inhabitants. The school is the only social institution in town. For 1 year they work with the mediator, Anastasia Macridou-Bretonneau, and the artist Nathalie Crasset on a project that wants to do something completely different. For 1 year they talk about it. And at the end, the mediator says, don't you have a really different problem? Like, your school is fucked up, to be honest. So the two teachers who kicked off the project said, yes, that's true. And they shifted the entire project and said, we need to change the school. But if we change it from the bottom up. So they worked together for a couple of years, and Nathalie Crasset not only designed the new architectural plans for a school that becomes the social center of the village with all different functions for all inhabitants, she also developed a completely new blueprint for school furniture that is all based on collaboration. So many items you cannot use alone in a meaningful way. And they found the money, 1.3 million euros, which is a lot for a small village like that. And they built the school, which has now become like a completely new prototype of school building and school making, including teaching in a certain sculptural architectural environment. Very different situation. In Cameroon, it's the first pilot project on the African continent. This is a pygmy community in southern Cameroon on the borders of the rainforest. These pygmy people have been nomads for thousands and thousands of years. It's an old nomadic civilization. And 50 years ago, they had to settle down. They were forced to settle down. They're not allowed anymore to use the forest in the way they did. And the mediator, Germain Lompet, who's an anthropologist, was aware of this situation because he had defended them in a legal case some years ago. And he knew that they are very aware that their culture must completely transform in the 21st century. And what their commission was, we want to design the transformation of our very own culture alone, on our own behalf. Because the pygmies in Cameroon are treated as basically the smallest and dumbest people. That's what they describe. Among the 250 peoples, they're like the stupid, literally small people from the rainforest who don't have a clue. But they are very, very proud and very fine social body. So the whole conversations were about how to reshape a new civilization for them on the local scale that they have, in a way that they can own it entirely and build it themselves. It's one of the few projects where until now actually no artist involved. So this is their community center, you could say. That's where everybody meets. And the conversations circle around the objects that they have, the knowledge of the forest that they have, and the very famous polyphonous chants that they have. That's the one thing that the Pygmies are really known for. So they come up in a 2-day collective meeting about the idea that they want to have a place, something that's like a cultural place, a community center, but also museum. They understand that they want to display the artifacts that they're doing, that have always been part of their normal lives, very much like the Solduits that you have shown. But in this case, it's the other way around. They want to be able to actually present it to researchers, to tourists, because it's also the only economy they will be able to make in the future. There is nothing economic for them available. And a 15-year-old boy suddenly said, and the trees that are days away, and that we know so much, they have to come here to settle down with us. And then someone else says, oh, that would be a botanical garden. So third element is a botanical garden. Because the knowledge that they have indeed is about widely outspread pieces of nature that they cannot show or exploit. So they started to build the entire project from scratch. This is Shaman Lumpet sitting on the plants with a man from the community. It's an outrageous endeavor for that little village to build a building like that. Also quite complicated techniques. And the building is finished, and the next project is the Botanical Garden to be built. Why I brought in this example? It's the same methodology. It's exactly the same blueprint. It's very simple. It's a group of people who say we want to take responsibility over a piece of our daily reality, and we have a kind of feeling about what it is, but we cannot give it profile enough yet. So we need support, but we also need people who create, who also bring in another imaginary. I don't have time to talk about a lot of stuff now, but just as another example, this is an association that represents 300,000 pensioners from East Germany. They were divorced during the GDR time, and due to that divorce, they get less pensions today than they should, which was a mistake in the reunification contract. And since 27 years, they protest against this injustice. And they managed last year that the United Nations finally condemned the German government to create a restitution fund. They approached me 3 years ago saying, we don't know how to solve our problem politically. Nobody sees us. We need to be seen. We are old, female, poor, and divorced, and we come from the East. We're the weakest lobby group. So it was a long process with them. Also, negotiation about solidarity with refugee women, for example, in order to create a bigger case. So we were trying to, as mediators, to really find out what is at stake and how we can shape a project. And now they're working with the Yes Men. This is the first workshop we did with them, where Igor Varmus from the Yes Men, some of you may know them from the United States, explained them historical tactics and strategies of women protests, from the suffragettes to many other different cases, and how they were strategically organized on the level of image production, where the journalists stepped in, how it was worked on in the legal cases, or how you can make fun of something, in order to find out together with them what can be done practically, literally on the street. I felt that being quite a transcultural meeting that day. But this is, if I would say that, it's actually really about the microzones that happen in these projects. There's a lot of people who he never met, who don't speak the same language, who have completely different backgrounds. The projects are the best if the artists come from a different place, when they're not part of the regional community. When they can take the chutzpah and the courage also to come in and say, come on guys, I don't understand your problem. Like, you're talking shit, the problem is elsewhere. Like, turn around and look at that. This is where transformation happens and where the best projects have taken directions that nobody would ever anticipate. And this really happens when you have an experienced artist who gets in there, is also, talking about the artist, often very happy to not have another museum or gallery exhibition, but to get the foot on the ground in a reality where people really need this artist's competence and involvement. And Remy Zaug did one of the best projects. He worked 10 years with the communities of 13 farmer families in Burgundy. It's actually our best project, but it takes too much time to explain. So the model is extremely simple. Nevertheless, it has a lot of consequences. So the commissioners, the patrons, approach the mediators. The mediators can bring in the artist. The patrons commission the artist directly. It's a direct contract between them. It's their project. Huh? The mediators are only birth helpers, and then they accompany the project. But it only becomes possible because there's a project ambition, which is a big difference to a lot of social processes that you can run that are very meaningful. But in this case, everything needs to pinpoint down to a commission, which is often 1 or 2 sentences. We want a work of art that does this and that. And to get to this one sentence can take you a year, but then you really know what this project is about. Yeah? And why I think it's interesting in this conversation here, you see here a fragment of France, you see how many projects had happened in that area. And if you see look on the bigger map, there's over 500 projects that had been completed until now. There are around 100 projects running right now, being in production. The model was invented in France and spread over to Belgium, to Italy, then to Germany, where I run it. And each program, each mediator is independent. There's no headquarter. There's no direction. It's a network of people who share the same methodology and ethics. And they meet in summits to exchange. We're working on shared European politics and that kind of stuff. But it's really a grassroots grown network that now gets more and more visible and more powerful because now we really, the people understand how to do that. So each decision is completely local. All the actors are local. But the program, you could say, is actually universal. This methodology can be applied anywhere and can be used by everywhere. And legally, the protocol by François Hers is open access artwork. So it's protected as an artwork that's open access to anybody. Yeah, and there's all types of works. 500 projects is a lot. This is the commissioners, too small to see. These are the artists who have participated. Nobody has a complete list. We only have track of 320 projects, all the other are not even recorded because they just, like mushrooms, they just happen. And nobody has an archive. And those were the mediators until now. Okay, thank you. That's my proposal.